Right, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Carto, for inviting and to share the floor with fellow location intelligence practitioners. Let's start by introducing ourselves, and I'll start with Clifford.
Hello, I'm Clifford. I'm the founder of Dorda.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Phil Cooper. I'm the Geospatial Global Lead for AWS. And a quick background on myself. I've been in remote sensing for 24 years now. But I've also been a geographer probably for longer than that. And I'm really, really pleased and very, very humbled and honored to be here.
Hi, I'm Justin. I work for Experian Marketing Services. So I'm probably universally loathed in this room for being on the sales side because I've got fellow work colleagues, brainy people, like a lot of you guys out there, and also clients here. So really appreciate being here. And I deal with clients helping their needs around customer audiences, segmentation, geolocation planning.
Great. All right. So, and I'm part of Nielsen IQ partner network, and what I do at the team is to find companies that want to work with Nielsen IQ data, and that's CPG data, so what we buy, how much, where, and produced by which company, how often as well. So I look for companies that have their product and service, and they could benefit from having Nielsen IQ data together with that product and service, and that's how we monetize our data. So and grow together. I'm a geographer as well, so I've been in the industry 20 plus years, and things that I've done have been spatial analytics, data monetization as well, and information services, and also products. While I was preparing for this panel and thinking about the topic, spatial data streams, I was thinking about, actually it took me on a trip back to 20 years back. And thinking about the way I did location intelligence then, it was a lot of the data I had to create myself with my team. So I worked at a telecom company back then, and I had to produce the maps ourselves. So we had to, initially we used touristic maps, because touristic maps have the points where people gather, and those would be great spots. Then we had field teams that went to the field and actually collected more data to overlay to those maps. We had to plot everything. Eventually, we started working with the cadastre team, and we bought a lot of cartography, and we spent a lot of money on that. And if I think about the end-to-end process, we had to, it was fragmented, the ETL that was going on. And it was very manual in some aspects. And also the way data was collected back then, like addresses, so client addresses, they were inserted manually. So when that data reached my team, we had to to geocode, we had to do a lot of parsing, a lot of cleaning of the data. And so that was back then. To give you another example from back then, I had to do a report on our evolution in terms of the network and how much we were deploying on the ground. And the cadastre team, I found out they use CAD systems, and they were just plotting the whole country in two cities, because it was the north team and the south team. And so if I wanted to report at the municipality level what was being implemented, I didn't have that perspective, because they didn't think about the uses of that data, how the geographic data they were creating could be used for business controlling, business evolving, and all of that. And so until now, it's a different ball game, right? So we all are walking sensors. We all collect data for free for telecom companies, for apps. And so and there's cloud computing, so there's a lot of other technology and data types that are available. And I wanted to ask, perhaps Cliff first, because you work with open data, how have you seen this evolution on open data sources, but also challenges that you've been facing in combing through all those different data sources?
I don't go as far back as 20 years. You must have been a toddler when you were, so that was 20 years ago. I would say from my perspective, when I first started looking at open data, it's probably about 10 years ago, when there was a huge government initiative. Some of you remember a site called data.gov, which was driven by the Cabinet Office, which has since disappeared because it was completely impossible to keep it updated, and it was always out of date anyway. Mm-hmm. So we started by looking at that, which all turned out to be a load of rubbish. There was nothing there of any value. It was never updated. So we started going directly to source, which is individual local authorities, government departments. Realized there's quite a few. In total, there's 1,500 potential sources of public data, and at last estimate, about 250,000 individual data sets. So we realized that lots of useful data out there had to be collected and pulled together. So we've created 3 product sets together. So we have property data, which is a bit HM Land Reg, which isn't really the best, to be honest. We've got a bit of Royal Mail. We've got EPC data around the energy efficiency. So we connect all these to a single address. And then with companies, we use the company's house to connect all that to a single company number, along with regulators. And then we do the geodemographic in the middle. But trying to create single indexes for all these is quite difficult. Company numbers are straightforward. Everyone's got a company number. Geodemographics, do people want an OA? Do they want a postcode, an LSOA, MSOA? Most people don't know these things. And the same with addresses. Is it Ordnance Survey? Is it Royal Mail? Is it Company's House? Is it the VOA? So the biggest issue we have is creating our own indexes, which we could then link data off and then feed it through to people, which is 8 years on the roadmap. And we're certainly waiting for a patent pending on our data matching algorithm. But yeah, the hardest part was actually firstly identifying the data, then creating indexes of how people could actually use it.
So you've seen an evolution there as well as in the number of data sets available?
Some ways yes, some ways no. Some data sets which were quite useful have sort of been delisted or reclassified. So a classic example being the energy performance data. It's technically an open data set, but not if you're using it commercially. So if you take that data and reuse it commercially, you're breaching Royal Mail's PAF licensing because the addresses are covered under Royal Mail licensing, but the non-addressed data is open data.
Right.
But you have to understand this, know the difference. If you just read it as open data, then you go, oh, great, I'll just take and use all this, but you can't. It's actually breach of Royal Mail licensing.
Well, I remember back in the day, in the situation that I was describing, one of the data sets that was available was land use. And we also use land use data to define where were the business areas. And to you, Phil, is that something that was based on satellite imagery?
Yep.
Has that field evolved since when you started, for instance?
Sure. Well, it certainly changed the days when for those of you who ever used Landsat data and were fortunate to get some satellite imagery. When I first started out, it would take 24 hours to process one single Landsat image. Mm-hmm. And you would hopefully get a bit of computer time in the core of the university when nobody else was using it. Today we have on AWS.
Sorry, there was just one computer.
One satellite, okay. one image. For those of you who remember the DEX and how it used to work. Today we're in a completely different paradigm. Today we have, so on AWS Earth, for example, we have the entire archive of Landsat. We've already seen several Landsat images up today. I personally think it's a highly underutilized resource, a 50-year satellite imagery archive. I think we've been talking about AI, machine learning. That is a data set that can be used right now. And we've seen a huge expansion. I think there's about 49 geospatial data sets available on the Open Data Portal through AWS. And many, many of our customers start there, working with that data, building out their services, and actually learning from it. And I think also from this morning's commentary, people will talk about skills. Open data is a really good place to start learning your skills in geospatial data. Whether it's raster, which is my background, whether it's vector, but actually that skills base and that learning and that blend of data science and geospatial is something that I think has continued to develop. And I think it's beholden on us to build the tools, to deliver the services, but also make it as easy as possible. And that's why we have things like S3 for storage or EC2, but also allow people to innovate. I mean, don't be frightened to innovate. Don't be frightened to fail. And
Can you give some examples of that innovation from that kind of input?
Yes, I mean, we have customers like Liveo, for example, who do vegetation monitoring along power lines and infrastructure. We have customers, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, Planet Watchers, for example, who are monitoring agriculture from synthetic aperture radar using Sentinel-1. We have customers like GeoLect, who do defense activities. And so more and more companies, certainly with cloud infrastructure, with AWS cloud infrastructure, can get their businesses going immediately, spin up services, test them, try them out, and then if it works, great, and then you scale. And if it doesn't, then you go, right, move on to the next thing again. And we're seeing that. We've got thousands of customers doing this. And back again to the original question, the geospatial data sets that we have available are there to be used, so take advantage.
Thank you. And what about things like, and I also did work with observation data, and one of the things that we were doing is counting cranes in different countries to understand which countries were accelerating their growth or also decreasing their growth ahead of us actually seeing those accelerations or these decelerations happening. And this was produced for investors, for instance. Do you also do those kind of things?
So we have, once again, hundreds of customers running on our platform doing that. Kairos, Prelegence, as really good recent examples. And what we're really excited about is the companies we haven't heard of next. And there are going to be people in this room who are going to create those companies. And that's really the exciting bit. Because the point I'm going to get to as well is it's not just about a single data set. The work we do with Kato, it's about aggregating data sets together. Having one single data point is not going to give you a great deal of information other than a static piece of data. Start overlaying data sets, start working with GIS. It's not going away. And as I say, it was really interesting listening this morning about GIS courses, but actually spatial data is just getting bigger. Yeah. Now the challenge is, are we quantifying it? Are we checking the quality? We were talking about AI. We have Bedrock now, which is an AI tool. I think the answers are going to come faster and faster and faster. Once again, I think it's beholden on us as a community to look at that. What's the quality of the data going in the first place? And are we checking it? It's all well and good saying, as you say, massive expansion in this, but actually, let's look at the quality of data. And that's both structured and unstructured data sets. And so many of our customers are doing that today, and I look forward to the customers that are doing that tomorrow.
That's true, yes. I also worked in the Middle East, for instance, and there's no addressing systems, formal addressing systems, so we had to rely on word of mouth, what people were saying online, where things were located, and what was relevant about certain locations. And I remember my team at some point had several data sets, and one of them was Wikimapia. And we were combing through all the text and the polygons that people mapped to understand what was so special about a given location. And to use that in our models to quantify and figure out what places in a given country were actually relevant. I want to hear Justin speak about the voice of the customers, right, the clients, for this kind of data. I have an example from when I worked in data monetization for a telecom company, where this was an insurance company, and they wanted to know how many people in a given geography had their app installed in their phones. So they didn't want to know who were the individuals, but how many had their app in their phones. And then they asked me also, can we also see if they, besides having our app, if they have our competitors' app in their phones, and how many are there? Do you get any kind of these requests from clients like that promote innovation and you to think on different ways to approach this data?
Yeah, we get a lot of spurious requests from clients, but a lot of very sensible ones. I mean, first thing I'd say is that client data is getting better and better. So first-party data is always the best starting point for any of our clients. By knowing what your customers are buying, where they live, what channels they interact with, what campaigns they're responding to, is always a great starting point. And then we can supplement that data with other streams. So the stuff that I've got a soft spot for is the geodemographic and segmentation data, which we can model at an individual level, household level, postcode level, hex level. And then, you know, we've been speaking a lot about mobility data this morning, and that's such an exciting thing. We've got innovation around linking the geodems up with mobility, which is going to be fascinating. Then layer in the card and expenditure data, the stuff that you know about, Raquel, with the Nielsen stuff, and also the kind of the card, debit card, credit card information. So all of a sudden you've got this triangulation of amazing data, first party, segmentation, geodemographic, card data, mobility data. And I think it's up to sort of data agencies like Experian and to kind of help you guys align that data, triangulate it, get it to a level of geography which is consistent, to your point about having multiple data points against one, you know, row of geography, if you like. And that's going to help customize models. And, you know, with amazing platforms like the Carto stuff, where we Experian do partner with Carto, and the facilitation platforms that you guys deal with, we're in a good spot, and we've only just really started. So we're in a quite an interesting sort of part of history, I think.
Thank you. I have another question back to Clifford, because he specializes in having all these data sets available. Is it, we're getting red now, very quickly, are we flooded with so much data that we don't know how to choose, or how do clients get to know which data set is the best to choose from?
I think, go back to everyone else's points, there's probably too much data in terms of what you want to go through. So I think if you're going to start going through trawling anyone's data, be it AWS or Experian, it's important to speak to someone directly who can guide whatever project you're working on, because you're not going to use just purely our data or Experian data. You want to augment that with your own data, and each project's got its own little viable options on what it's trying to achieve, being it modeling or segmentation. So always speak to a data expert in the field and ask them to guide you in the data that you're consuming and using.
So it's all about a 360 view of the consumer or
Yes.
the business or these different dimensions. All right, so I guess we can open the floor to audience questions. There's one there.
My question would be more for Dorda. I was wondering, how are you guys able to create a high-quality product using open data when you have challenges such as, like, for example, some data sets need address matching, or they come aggregated, or they have lags, or they're just very old data sets and they haven't come up with a newer cohort for those data sets? So how are you able to put all of those together to make a relevant data set?
With difficulty. I think to your point on there being many variants of a single address, and addresses being knocked down and subdivided and so on. So we use sort of Royal Mail as a core data set, and that changes every month anyway, or every week. So we tend to historicize the data that goes behind that. We also get variants of new addresses. So at Companies House, for example, it's a free text address box. So you can type whatever address you want. It's not validated. And we've come across addresses which don't have an address currently, I'll let you know next week. And that was the address put in the box, which obviously isn't a valid address. So we triangulate probably about 320 independent data sources to create a list of known addresses, which are postal, previous addresses, as well as non-postal addressable addresses. Create our own index based on the building and then a subdivision of a unit, and then we associate all the data sets in the back of that. So we're tracking our own IDs rather than using official sources, so to speak. And we do have patent-pending address matching technology, which is binary, as opposed to Liechtenstein, which is the distance matching, because distance matching an address is quite difficult, because like a postcode could just be one letter out, but it makes a huge difference. Because we have so many addresses, we can just say straight, yep, that's a yes, that's a no. And there's always going to be the corner units which you can't fix. But in general, we probably have the vast majority of addresses that they have appeared.
Any other questions?
Hello. Up here. Right-hand side. Or your left. There we are, waving. Lights. Perfect. Following on exactly from that question, what are your thoughts on references, on official reference systems such as UPRN and UDPRN for the identification of properties and addresses?
Well, it's interesting because UDPRNs are technically licensed from Royal Mail, but UPRNs aren't these days. The address associated with the UPRN is licensed from Royal Mail via Ordnance Survey, but the latitude and longitude is no longer a license under Ordnance Survey. So Ordnance Survey recently released a full list of all UPRNs with the associated latitude and longitude, which you then have to try and match to addresses to get the exact matching to it. If you're going to reuse data in terms of building a commercial model, then Royal Mail is, what, £100 for a single user license database, which for internal use is perfect. If you're using Ordnance Survey for that additional level of data, which, to be honest, I don't think is really worth it, maybe in some commercial cases for the commercial addresses, but not residential, then you're looking at sort of £10,000, £15,000 if you want the full data set. And if you're starting to resell that commercially as reseller licenses on top of it. So I think if you're going to start with, certainly with the address information, start with the Royal Mail path file. It's £100. It's not that big an expense against it. And then start appending new data sets to it and build out from there.
Other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was the Spatial Data Streams panel. Thanks.